Well, Yankees fans, the season is over. Welcome into Fantasy Baseball today on Thursday, March 9th. Frank Stampfl joined by Chris Towers, an emergency edition, talking about the injury to Carlos Rodon, who is dealing with a left forearm strain, will not throw for 7 to 10 days, and he is expected to start the season on the IL. Chris, before I throw it your way, I'll just do the glass half full, glass half empty, both sides here. Reports say that the strain has been diagnosed as mild. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Brian Cashman said in a perfect world, Rodon would return in April and that this is not a UCL issue. He also mentioned this is something that Rodon has dealt with in the past, specifically last May. Glass half empty. Rodon had Tommy John surgery back in 2019. He obviously has a history of left arm issues, though they are mostly shoulder related. And he's coming off a career high 178 innings pitched. Overreaction season, Chris. This is still very immediate. We're digesting it. The ADP for Carlos Rodon, SP12, 40.8 off the board. What is your initial reaction, and how far do you think he slips down draft boards?
Yeah, what we know in terms of concrete information right now makes this sound not particularly serious. He's going to be shut down for 7 to 10 days. It's a forearm muscle strain, not an elbow tendon issue. So, based on what we can say for sure, it doesn't seem that serious. But we're inferring, right? Like the reaction to this is not going to be based on the actual information the Yankees give out. It's going to be based on the inference that there is something structurally wrong, even if there's no UCL damage. Yet forearm injuries tend to beget elbow issues. At least that's the way we tend to view it. And so I think we should probably react. I don't know, what react means relative to overreact. Overreact might be dropping him outside of the top 100. I'm not going to do that yet. He's going to stay in my top 100. He's going to stay in my top 25 starting pitchers because I do think that when Carlos Rodon is healthy, he's arguably the best pitcher in fantasy. We don't know how he's going to fare playing in Yankee Stadium, being a fly ball pitcher there, but he's one of the best strikeout pitchers in baseball. He's got very good control. His run suppression metrics are all very, very good. I believe he led the majors in FIP last season. He's a very, very good pitcher. I had him ranked 7th going into this. I dropped him to 25. So right in front of Chris Sale at the starting pitcher position. I believe he's right behind Christian Javier. Might be a little low on Christian Javier. I'm starting to think I need to move him up anyway, but that feels like an interesting range of boom bust potential there.
Yeah, I don't have any issues in terms of the performance for Rodon. Chris, you mentioned, okay, he's going to Yankee Stadium as a fly ball pitcher. He's a lefty, and obviously there's a short porch in right field. I think if he was a right-handed pitcher and a fly ball pitcher, then that would hurt him a lot more. Mm-hmm. The projections on Fangraphs in terms of innings are for between 169 and 181. So they were kind of baking in that he was going to miss time at some point anyway. If he's back late April or early May, he could still potentially get to 170 innings. I'm not trying to paint this as a positive. I'm just saying the projections are what they are, and they were already kind of baking in that he was going to miss time. So keep that in mind when it comes to Carlos Rodon.
Yep.
I think you're spot on, Chris, in terms of where you moved him in the rankings. I wrote here, my initial reaction was to move him down to SP24 as the bridge from Yu Darvish and Zach Gallen. For me, that's kind of like the last of the trustworthy SP2s as the bridge to Robbie Ray and Tristan McKenzie, where maybe we have some skepticism on those guys. So I think right around that range. And if that's where Rodon falls to in ADP, that means he's probably going to drop about 30 spots because, again, he was going at pick 40.8 on average. And
I would guess
Zach Gallen's at 70.8. So about 30, 35 picks, Chris.
And I would guess, like in drafts that are happening right now or today, he's going to fall a little more than that.
Yep.
I think there's going to be more of a reaction. I actually don't know where Joe Musgrove has been going since his injury, but I do have Joe Musgrove just a little bit behind Carlos Rodon because I think there's less risk with Joe Musgrove coming back from that broken toe, but obviously the upside's not nearly as high with Musgrove. So I think that's a decent ranking range for both of them. Look, it's entirely possible that this ends up being largely a non-factor and Rodon misses 2 turns in the rotation, ends up making 31 starts, and he's a top 10 SP for fantasy, maybe a top 5 guy if he makes 31 starts. It's just like Brian Cashman saying, in a perfect world, he'll be back in mid-April. Yeah. Well, to me, that suggests May, because
for sure.
One, to steal a joke from Mike Gianella, why are there injuries in a perfect world? I thought that was a pretty good bit. But also, like, in a perfect world, mid-April, you're probably waiting a little longer than that then.
Yeah, I feel like we're kind of really painting the rosy picture here for Carlos Rodon. It obviously is serious, and this is someone who has an extensive injury history. So I don't want to downplay this. This is a very big deal for Rodon, someone that has upped his velocity the past 2 years. I mean, that is something that could be correlated. I mean, and so, again, like, there is definite risk with Carlos Rodon, but we will have a live salary cap / auction later tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern time. We're going live. Going to be very interesting to see how much Carlos Rodon goes for in that draft. And of course, there are ripple effects here, Chris, with Rodon falling down draft boards. That's one less ace to grab in the first 4 rounds of drafts. So everybody will move up a little bit. It's, it's kind of like the rising tide there in terms of the starting pitcher position. Who fills in for the Yankees early on in the season? We know Domingo Germán was likely already the team's SP5 because guess what? They have another injury. Frankie Montas is going to miss, I don't know, a large majority of the season after shoulder surgery. My guess is that Clark Schmidt is the one that's going to step in here, Chris, and he comes with some prospect pedigree, hasn't really lived up to it, but also hasn't really been given a fair opportunity so far in his career. 3.71 ERA, 1.38 whip. Most of that has been in relief. He was great in his first spring start and got blown up in his second one. Do you have any interest in Clark Schmidt as a late round flyer?
Yeah, I think Clark Schmidt, there are some interesting things about him. He's put up pretty good numbers in the minors. Overall, he has a somewhat limited track record. Like, we haven't really seen, I'm trying to figure it out. His total innings pitched in the minors looks pretty low. I'm looking at Fangraphs. They don't sum up a pitcher's minor league track record.
I'll pull it up for you.
But yeah, I think, like, he's been an interesting fringe-ish pitching prospect for a little while. And I think there's a case to be made that he could be useful for fantasy for sure. It's a good team. He should have good protection. That there should be the opportunity for wins. I think him and Domingo Germán are probably pretty similar now in terms of, the role that they're going to have in the Yankees rotation and the likelihood that they'll be useful for fantasy.
So looking at Clark Schmidt's minor league numbers, 185 innings total. He never threw more than 90 2/3, which actually kind of surprises me when it comes to Clark Schmidt. So look, if everything goes south with Carlos Rodon, then Schmidt is someone who could be in the rotation for the majority of the season. We just don't know right now. So keep that in mind. I think Domingo Germán's spot is a little bit safer now in the Yankees rotation. That'll do it. I was going to go on a little rant here, Chris, because look, from a Yankee fan perspective, I start off, the sky is falling. That's not actually the case. But there is something fundamentally wrong with either their team, the way that they address injuries.
Yeah, the scouting or the
it's a
training
disaster.
staff. Yeah.
I mean, Frankie Montas's arm was falling off last year. They go out and trade for him.
That was weird because he made like 1 or 2 starts after coming back from that injury, and then they traded for him. That was weird.
And he was bad with Oakland then, and then he came over. He was awful with the Yankees.
Yeah.
They wait all offseason, and then Montas has shoulder surgery. And guess what? They have 2 other relievers that are also starting the season on the IL, Tommy Hanley and Lou Trevino. It's just, what is this team doing? What is the front office thinking? Who is the medical staff? Like, who's in charge of this medical staff? It is a disaster right now for the Yankees. Obviously, we're hoping for good news for Carlos Rodon and hopefully back sooner than later. But I would say my initial guess is we're probably looking at May. A May return if everything goes well for Carlos Rodon. We're going to wrap there. For Chris, I am Frank. Thank you all for listening and watching this emergency edition of Fantasy Baseball today. We'll be back again later on today. Mailbag at 3 and then a live salary cap draft at 7. Bye-bye.